Today, we are digging deep into the story of Georgia. We're going to explore how its very foundation, its rocks, its rivers, and its regions, really carved out the path for its people, from ancient cultures all the way to the bustling cities we see today.
So let's start with the big question that frames this whole thing. How is it possible that one single state's geography could create such incredibly different economies, cultures, and histories all within its borders? Well, to get to the bottom of that, we first have to figure out where exactly Georgia is. Okay, so let's zoom all the way out to the global scale. First thing you need to know, Georgia is in the northern and western hemispheres. That simple fact alone sets the stage for its climate and its seasons.
All right, let's zoom in a little closer. We find ourselves on the continent of North America.
And zooming in even further, we land inside the United States of America, where Georgia is one of the 50 states.
And finally, we arrive right in the heart of the southeastern U.S. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. See, Georgia isn't just one single type of landscape. Nope. It's more like a mosaic of 5 completely different geographic regions, and each one has its own unique story. So, let's start our tour way up in the mountainous north. It's this beautiful, rugged area made up of 3 distinct regions that all share that classic Appalachian heritage. First, you've got the Appalachian Plateau. It's actually the smallest region, kind of tucked into what they call the Tag Corner, right where Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia all meet. Then there's the Valley and Ridge, famous for its long, fertile valleys that became a natural highway for travelers. And today, it's home to Dalton, the carpet capital of the world. And finally, the Blue Ridge, with the state's highest mountains and, you guessed it, the most rainfall. And when I say the highest peaks, I'm not kidding. Brasstown Bald, right there in the Blue Ridge, tops out at 4,784 feet. That's the highest point in the entire state of Georgia. And that kind of elevation, it defines everything about the region. So here's the key takeaway. This rugged, challenging terrain basically dictated the economy. It wasn't exactly great for huge farms, but its geology was loaded with other resources. In fact, it was the site of America's very first gold rush in a town called Delanoga. And today, that same breathtaking scenery is what fuels a massive tourism industry.
All right, let's head south and make our way into the Piedmont. This is Georgia's ruling heartland, really the economic and population center of the state.
You know, the name Piedmont literally means foot of the mountains, which makes perfect sense. It's a region of these gentle, rolling hills and that famous Georgia red clay. It's home to big cities like Atlanta and more than half of all Georgians. But its growth, its entire development, really hinged on one single critical feature. And that feature is called the fall line. Now, it's not an actual line somebody drew on a map. It's more of a zone where the elevation of the hilly Piedmont literally, falls down to the flat coastal plain. And as the rivers flow across this drop, they create a whole series of waterfalls and rapids.
And this created this perfect chain reaction. First, those waterfalls provided an amazing free power source for early watermills. But just as important, they were a dead end for boats trying to travel upstream. So what happens? These spots become natural hubs for trade and commerce. And that is exactly why Georgia's first major inland cities, Columbus, Macon, and Augusta, popped up right along the fall line.
Rivers like the Chattahoochee have always been the lifeblood here. For Native Americans, they were a source of food and water. For the early settlers, they were basically highways for the cotton trade. And today, the Chattahoochee provides drinking water for millions of people and is absolutely vital for recreation and industry. Its role has definitely changed, but its importance has not diminished one bit.
Long before any Europeans set foot here, the rich land and those vital rivers supported a very sophisticated society called the Mississippian culture. They built these large, organized towns right near the rivers, usually centered around these open plazas. They constructed massive earthen mounds for their leaders and ceremonies. They were masters of large-scale farming and used those rivers to create an extensive trade network.
And then, in the year 1540, everything changed. The Spanish conquistador Hernando de Soto showed up. Now, this guy was already incredibly wealthy from the conquest of the Inca in South America, but as one account from the time puts it, he came to the southeastern United States looking for even more riches. De Soto's expedition was an absolute catastrophe for the Mississippian people. He never found the gold he was looking for, but his men brought something much more deadly: European diseases that the native population had zero immunity to. That, combined with superior weapons, led to the total collapse of their societies.
It's a tragic irony, really, that the journals kept by De Soto's men are also the very first written history we have of the people who lived there. This violent collision of worlds would forever change the relationship between the people and this land. Okay, moving south from the Piedmont, we finally reach our last stop, the vast coastal plain, which is by far the largest geographic region in all of Georgia.
Just how big is it? Well, the coastal plain covers a staggering 60% of the state. It absolutely dominates the landscape of southern Georgia.
But this massive region isn't all one thing. It's really a place of two halves. You've got the inner coastal plain, which is the state's agricultural heartland. Think peanuts, peaches, and those famous Vidalia onions. And then there's the outer coastal plain, which is characterized by huge pine forests, the incredible Okefenokee Swamp, and of course, Georgia's deep water ports like Savannah and Brunswick, which are the state's gateways to the world.
And once again, it all comes back to the water. Just like the Mississippians built their towns on rivers, so did the first European colonists. Georgia's oldest city, Savannah, was founded right on the Savannah River in 1733, a spot chosen specifically for its easy access to the Atlantic Ocean.
And standing guard right off the coast are the Barrier Islands, often called the Golden Isles. Now, these islands are a lot more than just pretty beaches. They act as a critical natural shield, like a bodyguard for the mainland, protecting it from the full force of wind, waves, and storms. So, from the ancient Appalachian peaks all the way down to the vital coastal ports, we've seen how every single part of Georgia's history is fundamentally tied to the land itself.
The state's geography determined where people settled down, what kind of crops they grew, and how they made their fortunes. But that legacy is far from over. In fact, the very same rivers that once floated cotton bales down to the coast are now at the center of fierce modern-day legal battles over water rights between Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. The land that shaped Georgia's past is now posing the most critical questions for its future.